Our fathers worshipped in this mountain, and ye say that in Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship. Jesus says unto her, Woman, believe me, the hour cometh when ye shall neither in this mountain nor yet at Jerusalem worship the Father. Ye worship, ye know not what. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. Remember, this was a Samaritan woman. We talked a little bit about this last week, and they worshipped out of a mountain, one of the mountains that Joshua proclaimed the curses and the blessings from, something like that. And we saw a little bit last week about how the Samaritans started about, from the people left in the land when they were taken captive, and then the foreigners the king of Assyria brought in. Well, all that through the years filled up this region with the people we know as the Samaritans, who kind of had an imitation form of worship compared to the Jews. And Jesus is telling them now, look, the hour cometh where you won't worship in this mountain, nor even at Jerusalem will you worship. So verse 22 again, ye worship ye know not what. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews, meaning Jesus is coming through the Jews. All the whole Jewish form of worship, all that, was to get Jesus into the earth, and then, of course, to die by the hands of the high priest, to be that lamb. So salvation is of the Jews. It came through the Jews. But the hour comes, verse 23, and now is that time that Jesus, that generation Jesus lived in, when the true worshipers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for the Father seeketh such to worship him. God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. He says, the hour is coming and now is, because Jesus is on the earth, the Redeemer. He's going to die and rise again. He's saying God is a spirit. What he's saying is God has the nature of life, that same nature he gave to Adam and Eve when he first created them in the garden. And of course, they threw all that away. They sold humanity into sin, into spiritual death. But what he says, God is a spirit. He says he wants to bring man back into that same nature, that same nature that Jesus had. That's why he was qualified to be our Redeemer. He was the only man with his candle lit, with life in his spirit. And when he laid down that life, we then, by the grace of God, could get our candle lit, meaning we could become a born-again spirit. We could have life in our spirit. So as the same way God has life, we'll have life. That's why he says God is a spirit, and we must worship him in spirit. We must have the same spiritual life as God has. And of course, we get that through Jesus Christ. That's why he's saying the hour comes and now is, meaning in that generation, he's going to die and rise again. You no longer worship from this mountain. You don't worship from Jerusalem. That old form, the law, the Old Testament, all that passes away. The new creation comes forward as you get born again, and you can now worship God in spirit and in truth. He's a spirit. You're a spirit just like him. You have the same life that he has. You have a capacity to understand him. And that is how God wants to be worshiped. Father to son, father to daughter, daughters and sons born of their father. This is a family affair. You must have that DNA of God. And so that's what he's talking about here in John 4. It's the same thing he's talking about in 1 Corinthians 2. It's the same thing he's talking about in John 16, where he says, in that day, the day you get born again, I can show you plainly of the Father, meaning you'll have the same nature that he has, the same kind of spirit he has. You'll be, if you cut God's arm and get his spiritual DNA, then you cut your arm and get your spiritual DNA. You could easily see, oh my gosh, I am a son of God, an actual son. Not some weird religious thing where we try to put two and two together in our mind, but you actually become a son, a new creature.